Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Game of Thrones Winter's Coming. Today we're taking a look at the Glorious Battle event. It has been released to the public server. My plan is to make a video a week about this, where I update what has happened throughout the week, a couple of tips that can be used from experience and knowledge, and of course also general information about the event. It's meant to be like a progressive series. It's meant to be a little bit interesting to see what happens in different kingdoms. And we are in our pool of factions that we are against and so on. We have none of the super whale alliances, so that's interesting. At least we are like mid-tier alliances and some lower tier alliances. So the battle can be somewhat even-ish, but there's of course a strategic element to things. I'm in the yellow faction over here. As you can see, we've been spreading out down to the gate south, and then we have also spread out to the top Gondor Fortress, and yeah, trying to box in the Frost faction and the North faction a little bit so that we can gain full control of the area here and the area around here in the part down to the south. And we also had a PvP battle. The Frost faction has the Eero alliance, which is a Russian alliance, which was interesting. We had it today, a couple of hours ago, and so I generally have like a idea of how things work right now, both PvP and NPC-ish. My recommendation right now is to always look at the stats. When you click on a building, you can see level 3 troops, 800, city defense, and so on. You have to keep in mind that the level 3 troops decides, I believe, how big the army size is of the NPCs that you're fighting. The number here at the back shows how many waves you have to beat to zero out the point, and this for the fortress it's 800 waves. And the city defense is the stats from what I can see, and you can also see like in general like how things working and so on. And the influence is how many influence points you get for it, and of course the faction is what faction has control of the building. Overall, the event has been... the PvP part has been really fun, interesting. Definitely has a strategic element to it. It's not as costly. The NPCs side, however, is super costly. And if you don't have a person with the reinforcement skill, then you most likely will not be able to really spread out much on the map. You can see here, red faction has spread out relatively much. Purple faction has. Blue faction has, Frost faction has, this faction has as well, the pink faction, if you can say it like that, whereas the orange and green factions are struggling, and that's mainly due to the fact that they lack the reinforcement skill most likely, so they are taking heavy losses when taking attack against the NPC castles, and that's kind of the downside of the event right now. We've been playing for roughly a week, I would say, probably, almost. So it matches well that it will be like a weekly update every time, and I will just basically tell what our progress is every week and some details. But let's take a look at some information that could be quite helpful for those that are struggling in the event right now. So right now we can take a look at the things that happened in the first week, or at least that I experienced in the first week, and yeah, some information regarding it, how to look at it, and so on. First of all, we're going to look at how the preparation phase works, or worked rather, what could be done in it, and what you could do basically, and generally like how the game sets up things to actually understand how the entire system works. Secondly, we have the entire NPC castles and tips on potentially how it works, how to like rate the difficulty of them, and so on. And then lastly, PvP and how it works. We had, like I said earlier, a bit of a brawl against one of the points today with one other faction. It was interesting. It was funny as well, and Even though the PvP system is a bit odd, I don't dislike it. Actually, I would say like it prevents whales from just slapping people. So, but we're going to talk about that later on, I suppose, either in this video or in next week's video. So, preparation phase. On the first day, there is this matchmaking phase, and these different factions will be matched on a map, which I showed you earlier on in this video. And each faction will have around 4 to 5 kingdoms in them. I've seen that majority have 5 kingdoms, but for some odd reason the faction I'm in has only 4 kingdoms. And I don't know if it's something that's specific to our map only, or if there are some of the factions that have 5 kingdoms, but they judge it based on BR or activity or something like that. I don't know. But for reasonable and security, I would say 4 or 5 kingdoms in each faction probably. Either you're against the same amount that are in your faction, or you're against uneven numbers, I don't know, but that's potentially possible. And of course these kingdoms have to work together to beat the other factions, and the reason to why it's very important to work together is because the leading alliance from each kingdom has 4 members, which is usually the representatives of the alliance that has the top 4 positions in the alliance in terms of being the alliance leader, diplomatic advisor, knight commander, and economic advisor, I think is the last one. And these 4, from each single alliance of each kingdom, can basically declare war on points. And if someone does it where the people are not ready for it, then you most likely will not take the point. And that's something you have to keep in mind, of course. Once the matchmaking is done, which is 24 hours time, the actual event will actually start, which means that some of the points on the field will be unbubbled, and you will start to be able to, like, your faction leaders will be able to declare war on points and start making strategic movements on the map. These buildings, to begin with, will only be occupied by NPC armies, and further outside you can also see that the other factions on the map will also have access to the same amount of buildings that you do, except that these buildings will not be connected to each other. So you basically have a few day period where you can basically take it slow, take the buildings that you can get early on, if you have the horns for it or the resource for it to actually declare war, and you will not be under any threat of being attacked by a different faction at all. So that's good to keep in mind. That's like a slow start, and it's a good way to actually get into the event and slowly learn about how it actually works. During the first few days, as I said, you'll attempt to take a couple of NPC castles while also doing some quests put into the world progression page. These quests can be, I believe the first quest was something like gathering, can't remember if it was 1 million, or I think it was 1 billion supplies among all factions, and you will basically get a reward. And there will like be different quests like that, or occupy X amount of points, or do X amount of constructions, or stuff like that. And after a few days, the map will gradually open more and more up, which will allow for PvP to happen, which will allow you to expand even further. And it's important to do these quests, even though you are not in full control yourself. If you're doing your part and hope that the other factions are doing their part, then you will all get access to these rewards. I personally would prefer if it was faction-specific rewards, to kind of like make it so that one faction, by focusing on these rewards, can kind of get an advantage over other factions, or getting the rewards that other factions can. But that's just my competitive mindset that's talking about. But this is kind of what happens in the first few days of Glorious Battle, where your team is basically setting up, taking a few points, and trying to get to know how the map works, how the entire system works, and what you can do and what you can't do. Now we're going into NPC castles. Every point on the field will be an NPC castle to begin with. This means that you'll have to declare war on them, which costs a horn, and you get basically one horn from your faction flag each day at server reset, most likely. And by declaring war on them, you will, after I can't remember if it's 10 or 15 minute waiting phase, you will be able to start attacking the building. And the goal of this game, or this mode, is to get as high of influence as possible, which you will get from taking points on the field. Or these points can give you advantages in terms of strategic trading, can give you military advantages so you can actually expand faster, or just supply, which allow your trading to be more efficient and to allow you to construct more, and so on and so on. When you click on the details and look at the castle, you can see there are like certain numbers, and these numbers, for example, city defense indicates the stats the troops will have, which will be 1% total health and defense for every 1000 points. However, from what I've noticed right now in this event currently, is that the text and numbers doesn't match up correctly, and there's also a difference in terms of the total attack and the total health and total defense the castles will have. So keep in mind that from what I saw, the defensive stats are lower what's indicated, but the offensive stats are higher than what's indicated, so it's important to keep that in mind. The NPC castles will only have total attack, total health and total defense, and they won't have any troop specific or reductions or anything like that. So if you have reductions on totals, you can hit you can actually hit down on the castles pretty hard. And the NPC castles, when you're attacking them and so on, there will be like different waves and so on. And the amount of waves, you can see after the text, it will say like the level of the castle, and then will there be a number afterward, and that number after will be the amount of waves, and the level of the castle will indicate the army size. I haven't quite found out the number yet, how it correlates, but I can see that a level 2 will have a lower army size than a level 3 castle will have, for example. Once you get an NPC castle waves down to 0, then there will be a bar at the top, and this bar will have to be filled up, and once it is, then you will get control of that point. How fast the bar fills up depends on the amount of people you have inside the point trying to take it. From what I saw, it doesn't matter if the person has an entire army inside or if the person has one troop inside. So even odds or resources maybe only have one troop inside can contribute in the sense that it can speed up the progress bar and give you control of the point faster. And you can see here, it's like a picture from the event. You can see that the amount of influence the NPC castle has is 200. You can see the faction owner, the glory faction is the NPC faction basically, and the influence is how, like, is what you're being judged on at the end, if you win the event or not. The one that has the highest amount of influence wins the event basically. But there are of course different kinds of rankings and so on, but we go into that detail in a different video. You saw here that there's a level 2 troops, which probably indicates that it's, can't remember, it's 450 key army size or something like that, that's inside. And then there's like the number 800, which is the amount of waves that's inside the troop, which is 800 waves you have to beat, or 450k army size, with X amount of stats, which you can see here. So that's something to keep in mind. It's super interesting, but I believe they will have to change up, balance things a little bit so it gets less hard, and they will also have to like adjust the text so it actually matches the numbers that are inside the reports, because currently they don't really match and they are kind of unclear. So now we're going to take a look at the PvP. PvP won't be started until one faction declares war on a point owned by a different faction. We declared war on a point that was owned by the first faction. We did it at server reset, and once that happened, we had a 10-hour preparation phase, which means that in those 10 hours, the first faction could basically send in defending troops into the point, while we had to wait for those 10 hours to pass before we could attack. But we actually knew, like, we could basically plan ahead with our alliances that we were together with and say, okay, in 10 hours the attack starts, we have 1 hour to take it basically. You can also see here, once the 10 hours phase ends, the offensive faction can start attacking the point, which we did, and we started swarming the point. The point will start out with a few NPC waves to begin with, which I believe the base is 15 NPC waves. It's just to keep the attacking faction from just instantly capturing the point and starting the entire point deduction on it. And during like this time, the 10-hour time, the defensive faction hopefully has filled up the point, and during the 1 hour that you're fighting, the defensive faction can continue to basically prevent you from getting the position down to 0 waves. Once the attacking faction has the attacking faction has 1 hour to get rid of the defense inside the point, and during this 1 hour the defense can keep sending in reinforcements, like I said just before, and prevent from getting completely knocked out. Once the defense reaches 0 in the building, there will be a bar similar to what happens in an NPC, which will start to fill up. Once you have that bar filled up, if it happens within the hour, then you gain control of the point, and the enemy faction will lose the point. However, this bar won't happen or won't show until you actually get down to 0 defense from the defending faction. Which means that if you keep sending in, keep knocking out the attacking faction will never be able to capture the point. However, once it's down to 0, the bar will of course come, but you can still defend it, and the attacking faction still has to keep armies inside to actually accumulate points in the bar to actually fill it up. Which means that as long as you keep knocking out the attacking faction and keeping the amount of numbers low enough, the attacking faction will not be able to take the point away from you. However, once the bar is full, the attacking faction will gain full control of the point, and all armies marching towards that point from the defending faction will be sent back home, and that's going to conclude the PvP aspect of it. Now you might wonder how the fighting works, how the stats works, and so on, but that's something I will probably look more into next week's video, because there's so much to this event that if I took into every single little detail there was about it, I could probably make a 1 hour or 2 hour video, and that would just be too much to handle for one time. So this is going to be all for me this time around regarding the basics the first week and what I experienced the first week. And we can take a look at the field right now and what's going to happen. So I hope the tips and tricks that you saw before will help, and yeah, that you're enjoying the event, of course. The plan for the coming week is probably to expand out more, construct more, might have a few PvP battles. If we do, I might take some footage from it and put into the next video if it happens. If not, we're just going to expand out more and see if we can gain more control of the map and somehow try to keep the other factions away from us, so we're not at a, how to say it, unfavorable position. Because right now, I'll probably say the NPC castle in the middle gonna be a slaughter. I mean, it's 1000 waves, there are 5 troops. It's just, I have a bad feeling about it. And keep in mind, level 5 troops is not just like troops over royal or anything like that. The 5 troops just means it's pretty big armies, I think, army sizes compared to others. I'm not sure how big, but probably too big for a lot of people to handle, so that'll be interesting. And of course the world progression, we have completed the 3 first, the 4th one is already complete as well. We'll complete at the server reset. They were quite simple-ish, I suppose. If you have a faction page, if you can say like that, or faction map where there's a lot of people on, then getting the supplies and stuff like that is fairly doable, I would say. But yeah, first week's experience, PvP, fun, NPC, need some balancing, need some adjustments at least. And yeah, I would say this is probably going to be it for me this time around. Have fun with the event, guys. Hope you're enjoying it. Take care. comment down below if you want me to focus on something specific or talk about something specific, of course. Link to the game and music and so on is down in the description below, and so is it for the Discord group. If you have complaints and so on, you can also send it there. If you have suggestions, that's also the place. If you need searching for more information and so on, generally there are people there that can help you out if you have issues or something like that. That's always great, so keep that in mind. And yeah, enjoy the game, have fun, and take care. Bye bye.